Yeah, that sounds a lot better now that it's quiet down a little bit. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our 2024 annual meeting for ITS Georgia. Obviously, here in North Augusta, not to be confused with Augusta, right across the river. And for those of you that have successfully snuck out of Georgia, welcome. We're excited to have you here. I'm going to keep my comments relatively brief because we have a wonderful keynote speaker today with Andrew Heath, and I know that Madison wants to tell you all about the wonderful things that her and her team that have been putting together this wonderful conference have been doing. With that, so let me go ahead and do first things first, which is that throughout the day, they're not quite out yet, you will see QR codes littered throughout the conference. They'll be on your tables, they'll be out front. Those are for the best of ITS Georgia. So the things that you all have been working on over the last few months, the last year, we want to take that opportunity to celebrate you, the people that you've been working with, the crews that you've been working with, and the projects that you've delivered. So please make sure to take an opportunity this week to fill that out. Nominations do close on Friday. With that, I'd also like to let you know that we're doing a slight tweak this year. We will not be announcing our new board this evening. We will instead be announcing them at our awards banquet as well. So stay tuned. But if you have not already, as your voting member for your agency, please take a moment to vote. We have a wonderful slate of candidates, as always. It'll be a tough selection, but we look forward to what you guys have. With that, let me move on to this next piece, which is to say that there are a whole slew of people that made this event possible. Madison Dorminey, first and foremost, that led this all for us. But what I'd like you to do, for everyone that's wearing a nice fuchsia, is it fuchsia or hot pink? Hot pink shirt like me, if I can get you to stand up. You got to stand up, otherwise I'm going to call you out and it's going to be awkward. There we go. These people along... These people, along with a whole host of folks that were not able to make it today, made this possible. They spent countless hours. I think when we clocked it, it was probably north of about 1,000 hours that were put in to make this all possible. So thank you. Thank you to all those people. Thank you to Madison for getting us started great. For those of you that were here last night, I had a great time at the dine-around. I heard several comments this morning of people very much enjoying being spread out so they can have nice conversations, get to see the lay of the land, and get to be fed way, way too much food. And with all of that, let me see my last piece. Yes, our volunteers made this possible, but it's also made possible through the generous donations from our sponsors. You will see their logos flashing up throughout the conference. So thank you again to them making this conference what it is. And my final piece is a bit of an announcement, which is to say that if you are not aware of this, ITS World Congress will be in Atlanta next year. That's incredibly exciting. If you've never been to one, I have not. It is something like 8,000 to 12,000 people will be in Atlanta swarming us with their knowledge. It's going to be incredible. They've already reached out to us and the ITS Georgia community to figure out how they can really have a Georgia flair for this. If you are interested, if you are excited about this, if you want to be raising your hand to do a technical demonstration or leading a tour of your favorite Atlanta or regional Atlanta area, please let us know. We are collecting people to help make that possible. They are very much interested, again, in making it Georgia-centric. Part of that is figuring out a way to bring in Georgia speakers as well. They will be doing a call for speakers here shortly, so get those wheels turning. We very much want to brag about all the wonderful things that are going on here in Georgia. And before that, knowing that that will be quite intense, is that we are doing a joint meeting for a single day with ITS Tennessee. That will be in late January. It will be in lieu of our monthly meeting, but that will be up in Chattanooga. It'll kind of act as like a mini annual meeting. So if you're looking at the cost of ITS World Congress, which will not be cheap, but you still want to take advantage of really excellent things here from national and regional speakers, that will be a great opportunity for that. So I'm going to stop and hand it over to Madison to further kick us off.
Good morning. morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here. I'm excited to see you all. Welcome to the 2024 ITS Georgia annual meeting. I can't believe that we're finally here. My name is Madison Dorminey with AECOM. I've had the honor of being the annual meeting chair. I want to start off with a thank you to AECOM for allowing me to take on this role. All the support all of my coworkers here have provided me. Also, a big thank you to all of our sponsors, which you can find in your program, and they're also posted out in the hallway there. But especially to 360NS, Utilicom, and Temple, our 3 diamond sponsors. This event truly would not be possible without our sponsors, so thank you so much to all of our sponsors. We had a larger turnout. We had a larger turnout this year than we had planned for or anticipated, but it's awesome to see so many people interested and that are here. It's great to see all of our hard work finally coming together. Hundreds, if not thousands of hours of work have gone into this conference, and blood, sweat, and in all honesty, tears have gone into this conference. This year's theme is Mastering ITS, which is fitting not only for the location, but also to highlight all of the amazing things that you all have accomplished in advancing our industry. We have a great technical program lined up, and I hope you all learn something new. It's great to have so many people here from different backgrounds, and I encourage everyone to make new connections while you're here. We all have different places we work, different disciplines, and different passions, but we all have one common goal of bettering, or should I say mastering, the ITS industry that we all are a part of as one big team. I'm so proud and privileged to be surrounded by so many smart, talented, driven, and supportive people who push our industry forward, and I hope you all can take a moment to look around and appreciate that too. I now want to take the opportunity to give thanks to all the people who have helped as committee chairs for this conference. I know it's cliche, but it's true that this conference truly would not be possible without the help of all these people. So if you could please stand as I call your name, and we'll give them one big round of applause at the end. Ken Keena and Tyler Dickerson with Gwinnett County in the back running AV like the rock stars they are, they're awesome. George Curtis with KCI for organizing social events. Troy Galloway with 360NS for handling sponsorship. Y'all aren't standing, Troy. I don't know where George is, but Whitney Nottage with Q-Free and Mike DeSanza with AECOM for handling all communications and website needs. Yancey Bachman with Arcadis for organizing the exhibitors. Jeff Legg with AECOM for organizing yesterday's golf tournament. Caitlin Stewart with GDOT for organizing registration and for helping me with anything I needed along the way, as well as listening to all my conference problems. Holly Painter with KCI and ITS Georgia Vice President for providing guidance and resources as last year's conference chair. Matt Glasser with Arcadis and ITS Georgia President for always being available to help, support, and talk things through. Tom Glickert with Kimley Horn and ITS Georgia Past President for helping with whatever was needed and also providing a little comic relief along the way. Farrah Glasgow with Utilicom and ITS Georgia Treasurer for helping manage the extensive budget and payment schedule. And last, but certainly not least, I want to give a huge and special thank you to Edmund Jones with Jacobs, who took on the hardest and most time-consuming role as technical chair and blew us all away with his organization, communication, hard work, and genuine passion to make this conference a success. If you see any of these people around the conference, please make sure to give them a big thank you, and let's give them a round of applause. I hope you all find this conference to benefit you in some way, whether it be through technical sessions, a conversation over a meal, or a new friend made during a social event. Now, I have the honor of introducing our keynote speaker, Andrew Heath, GDOT Deputy Chief Engineer. Andrew began his career with the Georgia Department of Transportation in 2008 as a transportation planner. Within the Office of Planning, he worked in both statewide planning and with multiple metropolitan planning organizations across the state in the development of their capital programs. During this time, he was also instrumental in standing up the Transportation Investment Act program and guiding the regional commissions through that legislatively required process. In 2013, he was selected as the executive assistant to the chief engineer, where he helped to carry out the numerous responsibilities of the chief engineer position at the department. In 2015, Andrew was appointed to the state traffic engineer position, managing the Traffic Management Center, freeway operations and incident management, arterial management, and safety programs on a statewide basis. In this role, he was instrumental in standing up multiple initiatives at the department, including developing a large broadband expansion program, connected vehicle program, and initiating the coordinated highway and maintenance program, among others. Finally, in 2021, Andrew was promoted to the Deputy Chief Engineer position, over the divisions of engineering, intermodal, and operations. In this role, he leads 3 divisions of the department, handling a broad range of responsibilities across project pre-construction and roadway operations, and to other critical programs, including transit, rail, and aviation. Andrew is a graduate of AASHTO's National Transportation Leadership Institute and Advanced Transportation Leadership Institute, and was also named a finalist for the AASHTO Vanguard Award in 2018. Additionally, he was named the ITE Georgia Transportation Professional of the Year in 2022. He has a bachelor's and master's degree in civil engineering from Auburn University and is a licensed professional engineer in the state of Georgia. He and his wife, Elizabeth, live in Atlanta with their 2 children. Please welcome Andrew Heath.
Is this the clicker? Maybe. Well, while Keith figures that out, good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Pleasure to be with you here in Augusta, even though we are on the South Carolina side. That's okay, we're close enough. It was great last night. Had a great time last night up on the rooftop bar there, catching up with new and old friends and what we've been doing over the last 10 plus years in the operations space. Had a wonderful evening. I know you all did too. And it's a pleasure to be here with you this morning. Madison, thank you very much for the introduction, and look forward to having a good conversation with you guys. So I really like obviously we're in Augusta, so mastering ITS, that just sort of rolls off the tongue, but I do think it is pertinent for this group because we as an industry and we as a department, we stand on 30 years of history in the operations space. You know, going back to the Olympics, the run-up of what we did back then, standing up the TMC, the HERO program, kick-starting operations as a Department of Transportation for that critical event. And we have only grown and evolved since then. And it's testament to the state of the industry that we're here in a full room with numbers exceeding what was expected. And that just shows the great work that's being done by the staff at Georgia Department of Transportation, within traffic operations across the divisions, and you all as an industry and how you support us in what we're doing. So this presentation is a little bit of an update. It is primarily, I like to think, a good news story, but we certainly have some headwinds and certainly have some things that we need to think about as we continue to advance the state of ITS and the state of operations here in Georgia. So I do have an agenda slide, just very high level, some of the things I want to talk about. First and foremost, I want to get into our budget a little bit, because our budget is a good news story. We are standing on historic budgets for a Department of Transportation, larger than we've ever had before, which is great. That has enabled some major announcements, major advancements, both on the capital program side, but also influencing ITS and operations, and has translated through partnerships into the incredible economic growth that we've seen as a state of Georgia. But we do have headwinds. We do have challenges that are before us, and I'd like to talk about some of those things. So let's first and foremost start with the budget. Many of you are probably familiar with what happened in the FY24 budget. But on February 29, 2024, Governor Kemp signed HB 915, which was the amended FY 2024 budget. And I bring that up because included in that budget was an infusion of $1.5 billion of state general funds into GDOT's budget. That brought the state component of our budget to almost $4 billion, which is by far the highest it has ever been. Many of you remember the Transportation Funding Act of 2015 and when that passed. Well, prior to that act, our budget was usually around $1 billion. The Transportation Funding Act essentially doubled that, and now when you have infusions like this, you're getting close to that $4 billion mark just on the state side. So that is not inclusive of federal aid money coming through the bipartisan infrastructure law. So obviously, that is a tremendous thing that happened for the state. It's incredible news. It's an incredible opportunity that the governor and the legislature has afforded the department to deliver on critical infrastructure. And it goes without saying, but this is state general funds, right? This is not motor fuel that is constitutionally directed to transportation. This is money that could have gone to anything. And it was decided that infrastructure and transportation is critical to the state of Georgia. So the legislature and the governor made that possible through this act and specifically said, we're going to put that kind of money into transportation, which is an amazing testament to the work that we are all doing as an industry. Now, when you pull back the onion a little bit, pull back some layers on that $1.5 billion, this is what you'll find underneath. Sort of 5 key programs included within that $1.5 billion. $98 million for airport aid. We were talking about this last night, that GDOT is actually what's known as a block grant state, where we administer infrastructure improvements on behalf of the FAA here in Georgia. And usually our budget is about $20 million. Well, this investment provided almost $100 million into airport aid to deliver things like taxiway expansions, runway expansions, rehab, things of that nature, safety systems at general aviation and regional airports across the state. That's a massive infusion into the airport program that we haven't ever seen as a state. Critical infrastructure that's critical for local cities and counties, enabling us to advance a number of projects in that area. Local road funding of $250 million. Many of you are probably familiar with our local maintenance and improvement grant program. I see some nodding heads, the LMIG program, which is usually around 10% of our budget, or around, I said that $2 billion number, around $200 million, which we directly distribute to cities and counties to do work on their local systems, resurfacing projects, striping projects, things they deem critical. We push that out every year. That money comes with a match requirement, depending on where you are as it relates to the TIA program, either 10% or 30% match. But we do that every year. This was an interim infusion into the local road system, $250 million, that came without a match. So we got the FY24 LMIG money out, $200 million, supplemented it with an additional $250 million, and now we are into FY25 with another $200-ish million. So for cities and counties, what this infusion of funds has done has been absolutely tremendous for them, allowing them to tackle their problems on their local system. A brand new freight program, $500 million. We talk about the economic growth that is happening in Georgia and how it's foundationally based off of the movement of goods and services coming out of the port, servicing Metro Atlanta and the growing areas across the state, anchored by the private investment in e-mobility. It's all about moving goods and services for folks. That creates a lot of challenges as it relates to infrastructure, to move that freight. So this is an investment, sort of a down payment to get some critical projects started that are directed towards helping the movement of freight across the state. $593 million invested into the capital construction program. That is specifically around bringing projects back in that were shifted out due to cost increases. And I'll get into that here in a little bit, what we've seen on that front, but allowing us to accelerate those projects back and get those let to construction, get right-of-way purchase, things of that nature, to get these projects done from a capital construction standpoint. And then finally, taking care of what we've got, our most foundational mission, along with safety at a Department of Transportation. We've got to take care of the infrastructure we have. So an additional infusion of $50 million into capital maintenance that will leverage federal aid dollars to resurface some of our critical routes across the state. And you can see sort of the increases, the percentage increases in those budget categories below. So what this means with this $1.5 billion in our budget, 42 total projects have been expedited because of this. For over 40 years, 40 plus what we call project years. So if you accelerate one project by 1 year, that's one project year. This money is allowing, it's 42 or 43 project years of advancement for these critical projects, of which 19 are new on that freight side. So that $500 million, those new projects specifically focused on moving freight. Of that local roads piece, the great news is 90% of that money is already out the door. It's in the hands of cities and counties to do the projects they need to do. You see that number, about $223 million. On the capital maintenance side, 12 additional resurfacing projects leveraging federal aid, and then 38 additional airport projects across the state on the aviation side. So absolutely critical investment in infrastructure. And if you want to know more about what this program is doing, what this infusion is doing, this is just a sample of some highlighted projects, and you can kind of get a sense of what we're doing. Scan that QR code or go to that link. You'll get a full list of where this money is going, the investment by project, when it's anticipated, what we're doing with this money. But just a couple things to direct your attention to. The widening of I-16 in Chatham and Effingham counties. So that's picking up at the 1695 interchange, where that project is coming to its conclusion to get that interchange rebuilt. Widening to a 6-lane facility up I-16, where we've seen that unbelievable growth in Chatham, Effingham, and Bryan counties. So carrying that facility north, as we've seen that freight movement become so critical. Things like the I-75 South Express Lanes upgrades. Y'all are probably wondering what that is. You think about the ITS and operational investment in a facility like that. As you all know, that is a reversible facility, that express toll facility. For those of you down there, you probably always say it's going in the wrong direction every time I want to use it, right? Well, this project will upgrade that to be bidirectional, right? So it will no longer be a reversible facility, and this money is allowing us to get this project into the pipeline and move it towards construction. This wasn't on our radar until we had this $1.5 billion investment. So obviously, when you talk about the budget, some incredible news, right? Record-setting budget, and we really have to thank the legislature and the governor for that, and thank industries such as yourselves and the support you provide, that when we are afforded that responsibility and opportunity, we are always able to rise to that challenge, so they see us as a safe bet in getting the money out, which is obviously tremendous. So continue the good news. We had a big month last month. So some major announcements. Some of you were probably in the board room as these projects were announced. The first one is 285-20 interchange reconstruction on the west side of town. Look at that cost. Look at the size of that contract. $1.2 billion of investment to rebuild that critical bottleneck. I can't remember exactly where it stands on the top 10 list in the nation, but it is in the top 10. What is it? 5. Number 5. Bottleneck in the U.S. You all have probably seen the trucks waiting to get through that interchange, just stacked on the perimeter. So getting this to construction, getting this contract awarded was absolutely tremendous. Think about the operational improvement, the efficiency we're going to gain. For a period of time, this was the largest contract GDOT had ever awarded, for about 20 minutes. And then we followed that up with the State Route 400 award. And you can see that design and construction cost, $4.6 billion, to add bidirectional express lanes, 2 lanes in each direction, 16 miles up 400 from basically 285 heading north, direct access points, including inline transit, bus rapid transit with our partners at MARTA. For that congested corridor, that heavily commuted corridor, obviously a very impressive and critical project to get out the door. This was a concession. And so you can see 2 numbers up there. One is the design and construction cost. One says concession at $4 billion and $50 million. So to be clear, the way this contract was structured, the design and construction cost is being financed by the concessionaire team of Meridiam and Acciona with ACS Infrastructure. So they are financing this project and building it. In addition to that, they are providing the department with a concession payment of $4 billion and $50 million for the rights to operate and maintain this facility for 50 years. So when you see those 2 numbers, those are not offsetting numbers, those are additive, in terms of the impact to the Department of Transportation. So last August, when you sum up these 2 projects, in addition, we were able to advertise a letting of about $300 million. We were able to push over $6 billion of projects out the door in one day, which was a pretty monumental achievement for our Department of Transportation, for our industry. So incredibly good news there, great stuff. We're not done. The I-285 20 East interchange, many of you probably drove through it heading out here to Augusta, well under construction. You can see some of those flyover ramps taking shape as we work to alleviate that critical bottleneck. In addition to that, we are moving forward with the 285 top end and those express lane facilities as well. So we are rapidly advancing that on the heels of this project to build that Metro Atlanta regional express system. And we look forward to capitalizing on the success of these major announcements moving forward and continuing to build that relationship, that trust with industry, to show that we can get these projects done and we can get them built for the citizens of the state. So staying on announcements, you're going to hear a lot on NEVI from Christina Berry later in the program. She's going to get into the really the meat of what Georgia DOT is doing from a NEVI perspective. But the great news here is that we have been successful in delivering 5 NEVI projects so far. We have awarded them to construction, and those contracts are underway with those developers. And we are underway with a second procurement for 33 additional NEVI sites. So you can see all the dots on this map. This will fully build out all our alternative fuel corridor sites, 50-mile spacing per site, so that when you look at the state of Georgia, you can see a backbone beginning to emerge of DC fast charge EV stations. So you think about the transition to electric, Georgia DOT is certainly doing its part to make sure that the critical infrastructure is there to support that need. So when you're making a trip from Atlanta to Savannah, you have confidence as a driver that there would be a DC fast charge station there waiting for me at one of these locations where I can juice up my vehicle and I can get rid of some of that range anxiety. The coolest thing about this is that we had to figure out this industry. As a Georgia Department of Transportation, we had no experience whatsoever engaging with the EV charging industry, working with companies like EnviroSpark or Electrify America, or traditional fueling stations like Racetrack or Love's. You know, this was a completely foreign group of folks to us, and we had to understand what makes them tick, and they had to understand from us what makes us tick. And why is it when we put out a procurement, it's 300 pages long and it's full of all kinds of stuff, you know, all these requirements, all these types of things, and work with them to answer these questions and better understand each other, to get these things out and to get them awarded. And we were successful with the first 5. Every single one of these sites is a standalone P3 procurement. You know, people talk about P3s as huge. I just showed you 1.2 billion, 4 billion, you know. These are 600,000, but it follows a P3 model, and we have translated what can be very complicated statutes, rules, policies into something more simple that this industry can engage in and that we can do repetitively and at scale. So right now we're procuring 33 P3s, and Christina's responsible. But she's doing a great job. Staying with announcements, broadband. This is something that John Hibbard and I have been working on for a long time. And we've had a number of successes over the last year, finally transitioning our broadband expansion program into reality. 5 design builds to build infrastructure, 2 of which are already under contract. I was just talking with Michael Presley a little while ago. 10 miles of conduit on the first design build in the ground. Every day, it's getting, you know, they're building it. I like to joke that picture on the left there, that's one of BBH's crews that's doing design build 1. You can see the guy with his hands on his hips, not looking too happy. And he's standing in Henry County. And all I can think is, right now he's thinking, you're telling me I gotta walk to Florida? Because that's the scope of Design Build 1, from just north of Metro Atlanta all the way to the Florida state line. Design Build 2, the entirety of I-16 and getting out to the Madison area along I-20. So our navigator system, our fiber network for years has been around 300 centerline miles, right? All in Metro Atlanta. Just these two projects alone are more than doubling the footprint of our ITS network, wireline and ITS network connecting our devices, sensors, signs. So when we have things like Hurricane Irma and 7 million Floridians evacuating from Florida, we will be able to communicate with our devices, whereas before we could not. And we are overlaying this with connected vehicle technology, and we are further empowering it with the private sector through a secondary procurement that's underway right now for operating, maintaining, and commercializing. And you're going to hear the details of this from Ben Lemke later today. It's a fantastic program, a lot of great work, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that went into this program, but we are finally getting to the point where this is becoming reality. So absolutely incredible news, and a testament to Georgia DOT staff for continuing to push the needle and continue to advance this. This, by the way, our investment into broadband is our commitment to AASHTO, our governing agency, the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials, all 50 state DOTs, where we all as AASHTO came up with the whole concept of a moonshot. It's like, let's do something crazy to push the needle on transportation as 50 state DOTs. And they solicited essentially commitments, unfunded commitments from DOTs to say, what can you do to push the needle? And we said, we'll light up our interstates as Georgia DOT. And we're delivering that. So when we're talking to our partner states across AASHTO, we can say, look, we are doing this, we have done this, we are underway with this. Tennessee, why don't you do the same? You know, Kentucky, why don't you do the same? Ohio, why don't you do the same? And all of a sudden you're saying, okay, we're all now lighting up I-75 and we're sharing information up and down the entire U.S. That's the goal of where we're trying to do, and we're taking a leadership position in doing some of that. So then working with our partners, this investment, this success in infrastructure has enabled things like this. And you have probably seen this type of map before. It's the good news story on the e-mobility private investment that has happened in the state of Georgia. This map is announcements from the Department of Economic Development since the year 2022. Every single thing you see on there. Tens of thousands of jobs and tens of billions of dollars in private sector investment into e-mobility. And it's the reason why we're seeing this investment into Georgia is the full portfolio of what the state of Georgia has to offer, but it's anchored by infrastructure. And it's anchored by what we do as a Department of Transportation, what we do as a transportation industry to make this type of investment a reasonable and safe bet for these companies. And you could see the names. I mean, you all know the Hyundai Meta plant down outside Savannah, Archer Aviation, we were talking about eVTOLs last night over in Covington, Rivian as they come along, right, east of town. Hyundai SK-On battery. You think the Hyundai Meta plant site is big? Go check out that site on 411 near Cartersville. It's huge. It's absolutely massive. But this is the investment we get. There's a story in the AJC this morning talking about the e-mobility investment in Georgia, but how that's being replicated across the Sun Belt as well. So when you look at where sort of the future of automation is seeing investment, it's Georgia, it's North Carolina, it's South Carolina. You got to go to number four to get to Michigan. They're trailing automotive investment in these new technologies, this new electric technology. So the work we're doing as a DOT and as an industry is enabling these things to happen. And this is ultimately what it looks like, right? You guys have all seen this if you've driven to Savannah. You know, 16 million square foot facility, 3,000 acres. That road in the front there, that was our project. Proud of that one. But that speaks to the partnership. This facility is already, this facility was announced less than 2 years ago, and they're producing vehicles already. The Ioniq 5 battery electric. So absolutely incredible. So our work, our budgets, our support, our partnerships, all of these things have led to this type of thing being possible here in the state of Georgia. And this is what we need to replicate moving forward. So I mentioned headwinds. You guys knew this was coming. But cost increases. Everybody's seen this, you know, whether professionally, personally, what have you. What you are looking at here is the National Highway Construction Cost Index. Is anybody familiar with this? I see one or two hands, not too many. What this is essentially are a series of inputs of costs realized by departments of transportation for what it takes to essentially build a highway. So it's your steel, your concrete, all of those inputs. Labor is included in that, based on actual bids. And it's indexed back to 2003. So the index at 2003 was 1, right? So baseline it to 2003. So you're following that line. You can see it spike there until you get to about 2008. Then what happens? Comes down. Everybody knows what happened in 2008. And you can see it increase. So in 2020, this index was 1.8. So what cost you $100 in 2003 cost you $180 in 2020. Well, if you go to the end of 2023, it's now 3.1. So what cost you $100 in 2003 cost you $180 in 2020. Now it costs you $310 just 4 years later, right? That spike has put headwind on our program, right? So we talk about budgets, we talk about investment. This eats away at our ability to do work, right? John and the State Maintenance Office manage our statewide resurfacing program. The number of lane miles we were able to resurface last year compared to 4 years before has dropped in half. The investment has stayed the same, right? But it's these increases eating away at our ability to do projects. So we have to continue to be mindful that even though we've had incredible announcements, incredible work, and we have the support of the legislature, we got to be mindful of this, that it costs more to do business. And if we're going to make the investments or continue to make the investments into the citizens of Georgia, into freight, into what have you, we've got to fund it accordingly. Whether it's roads, bridges, technology, you name it. We got to make sure that we're staying ahead of the curve so that we continue to move forward. So here's another way of looking at this, and it's a little busy, and I apologize for that, but there's 4 indices on here. The National Highway Construction Cost Index, and you can see how that moves on up. Then you have the Producer Price Index, which is the cost of essentially producing a good or a commodity. You have Consumer Price Index. You all are familiar with that. Everybody knows Consumer Price Index because that's what you as a consumer pay and how that has changed. And then you have the Employment Cost Index, which essentially you can think of that as a proxy for isolating the cost of employment or labor. And they're all generally trending up. The Producer Price Index has come down a little bit, but you can see as you combine the impacts of all these things and what we do as a business in the transportation industry, that compounding effect on the cost of highway construction. And I do want to point out the difference between the NHCCI, the Highway Construction Cost Index, and CPI. And the reason why I want to show that, you can see that delta growing. Because we have a motor fuel tax structure regime in the state of Georgia that is indexed. So that as things go up, our excise tax for motor fuel also goes up. It's indexed, but it's indexed to CPI. It's not indexed to the National Highway Construction Cost Index. So that outpacing, right, just creates additional headwind in our ability to do business and our ability to deliver projects. So we have to be obviously mindful of that. A few data points for you. This chart shows essentially, this is a 12-foot lane mile. What's it cost to resurface that? One 12-foot lane mile. So think of your traditional 2-lane road, go resurface 1 mile of that road. If you want to know what it costs to do both sides, double the prices you see on here. But you can see that in 2020 it was around $80,000, $90,000. We are now upwards of close to $150,000 to resurface 1 lane mile of one asphalt roadway. The 2 lines, one is the low bid, the actual realized bid from the contractor. One is our internal engineer's estimate, so that we do our own estimates before we bid out the projects, so that we have a sense of, are the bids we're receiving generally fair, so that we can award that contract to construction. And you can see how that's trended, right? The good news is that when you look at the last 6 months, you start to see a little bit of a leveling off, right? So that low bid number has flattened. So the acceleration of cost increases we have seen it begin to slow. Will it come back down? I am not an economist. I don't know the answer to that. My gut is probably not. This is just the reality of, again, the cost to do business. But If it's flattening, we can get a better handle on it. We can budget more appropriately, things of that nature. So that's asphalt. Oh, here's the increases, 69 and 67% increase. Urban widening, same story, right? But not 60 to 70%, 115 to 118% increase. Again, this is from 2020 to 2024. So take your traditional 2 to 4 lane urban widening, curb and gutter, typical section, and you can see that to do 1 mile, it's about $18 million of an arterial, 2 to 4 lane widening arterial in an urban setting. But again, if you look at the last 6 months, you are seeing a little bit of a taper there. Now, when you look at the numbers of projects, obviously these are bigger projects. There's a lot more that goes into it, so it could be a little bit more volatile. But the trend is looking a little bit more positive. And then same for rural widening, rural new location, but you can see the increases there. 160% increase from 2020 to 2024. Again, not too many projects, so that's why you see that volatility. And for this type of project, we haven't seen that leveling off happen yet. So cost increases are obviously a big concern and something that we got to get our heads around. A few other headwinds, and I don't know if Greg Morris is here, but he might want to close his ears for this part from Federal Highway. You guys have seen this slide. We've talked about this a lot before, right? This is, you break down the bipartisan infrastructure law, and this is kind of what you get. You get your formula plus-ups, you get your new formula programs, NEVI, things, carbon reduction, things of that nature, discretionary programs, and then other policies and other programs. I want to focus on discretionary for a moment. Because as you all are probably familiar, the bipartisan infrastructure law dramatically upscaled the number and the size of discretionary programs that are available, either to DOTs or directly awardable to local governments. A whole host of programs covering all types of things, which is great. A lot of opportunity to compete, a lot of opportunity to compete on programs that are very specific to what you want to do. So there's a whole host of ways a local, city, county, state DOT can work with the federal government, can compete and deliver dollars for a specific project that is of maximum interest to themselves. The challenge that we've seen in delivering these discretionary programs is that it is taking a long time to get these contracts executed and get the money obligated. Right? So we've seen programs go out the door, we've seen awards happen, but we're seeing a lag of over 18 months from award to execution, right? To actually obligate the money and get it in the hands of the city, of the county, of whoever is trying to do that project. It's taking a long time. And it's not, I was messing with Greg earlier, it's not Federal Highway's fault. I mean, this is an incredible amount of work that they have been asked to do through this legislation. But it creates pressure on the federal side of the ledger, on the federal program. When you have unspent dollars, what happens is there's a process called redistribution in August, where all those the unspent obligation from the prior year gets pooled back and then gets distributed again to the states. And it happens in August. So this money comes out and Federal Highway says, okay, it's August, here's the money you've got. You have until the end of the federal fiscal year, which is September 30th, to obligate that. Right? August, September. Right? You have 1 month, we're doing it right now. Right? To get all these projects done. That makes it difficult to plan, to budget. These things have to be ready to go. Right? So if you rewind the clock about 5 years, this process has always existed because money gets unspent and then it gets distributed again. In Georgia, we would typically receive around 60 to 70 million in the August redistribution process. So we go get a handful of resurfacing projects, maybe some striping, things that we can get turned around very quickly and get it back out the door. This year it was over 450 million was offered to the state of Georgia. It was over $8 billion nationwide that had not been spent, many of which was committed through these discretionary programs, but the grant has not been executed yet. So it's not showing up as obligated. So it gets pulled back. Well, so now go to the next year. What happens? You've got an agreed upon commitment to fund that grant. So you finally get to the point where we're ready to execute. So what does that mean for next year? It creates downward pressure on the federal funding available for us, for our basic formula programs, right? This is I'm not poo-pooing the feds or what the bipartisan infrastructure law is, because it was truly historic. I'm just trying to explain that, no fault of anybody's, it creates a headwind in our ability to deliver. And it's something that we got to continue to think about. The other thing on the federal side is we're talking about bipartisan infrastructure law. We're 2 years from the expiration of it, right? So those conversations around reauthorization have to be happening now. Regardless of what happens in November, one administration or the other, that administration will be faced with tackling reauthorization for transportation, because it's going to come up, during that period of time. And we as an industry need to be driving these conversations that, one, we don't want the bipartisan infrastructure law to be a one-time investment in transportation. It was billed as that historic investment. No, this needs to be the baseline moving forward, right? And let's talk about what we can continue to do to advance the state of infrastructure across the country, because it is that important. And when you see cost increases eating away at what they're doing, that level of investment has to be sustained. So anyway, I just offer that up. So this is my last slide, but I'm going to pull out my sheet of paper here so I can kind of leave you with my thoughts. And I wrote these down last night. So first and foremost, I'll reiterate that we as GDOT, we as an industry are in a very strong position, right? You saw the announcements, you saw the budgets, you saw the things that we're doing. And again, it's testament to our leadership, our commissioner, Russell McMurray, our chief engineer, Meg Perkle. They've been a steady hand at DOT now for, coming on a decade, which is incredible when you look at the average tenure for folks that are in those positions. And they have developed those relationships under the Gold Dome with industry, and has got everybody rowing in the same direction. And that is being realized, through what folks are giving us, the opportunity that folks are affording us. That creates opportunity. That creates opportunity for ITS Georgia. That creates opportunity for Georgia ITE, for industry. We need folks. We need people to help us deliver on this, and we look forward to continuing to advance that. But those cost increases are creating headwinds, like I talked about, both on the state and the federal side. But that's what I love about ITS. It's cheap. When you compare it to concrete and steel, dirt, asphalt, the work you guys do is on the margins. Right? Can't remember the exact percentage, but usually when you talk about a large infrastructure project with an ITS component, the ITS component is in the single digits. So it's an industry that's able to absorb a little bit better and still deliver. And it pushes efficiency, it pushes optimization of the roadway network. So it's an area we have to continue to focus, because we can. So that is why you've seen our investment in broadband. That's why you're seeing our forward focus in rolling out of connected vehicle technology. Why we're taking an aggressive posture is because we can be around the edges. But we got to continue to look forward. Last week, I was sitting with a bunch of trucking companies, large companies, JB Hunt, UPS, Home Depot, Hapag-Lloyd. Was sitting in a sort of a forum with these guys, just talking about infrastructure, talking about their needs, and the whole conversation went to digital infrastructure and how they need information. And it became an education session for them. Say, well, did you know GDOT does this, or did you know we can offer this or offer that? They had no idea, But what it points to is what ITS does, what ITS Georgia does, working with Georgia DOT. The information that we create is invaluable to them. So how do we continue to leverage data, leverage our assets, leverage the things that we do to make their jobs easier, to make their bottom line better, to help them move goods and services? It was a tremendous conversation. But it's what we do every day, right? And it's the outputs of the things that we do every day. That's like gold to these folks. And they don't even realize that it's there. This was last week, and we can make it available to them at sort of next to nothing. You're seeing continued announcements happen. Waymo just announced they're coming to Atlanta, right? So that you can ride their L4 Uber taxis, really nice all-electric Jaguars, you know, around downtown Atlanta, starting probably the beginning of next year, end of this year, you know. But they are viewing Georgia as a forward-looking place, a technology-driven place, and it's the things that we're doing that they make that decision. Like, yeah, we're going to be there. You know, we want to be a part of that. So our history, our 30 years of history, have put us in this position. Now it's up to us to continue to advance the ball. So I appreciate the time. Appreciate you guys having me, and look forward to the conference. And I'm happy to answer any questions you got. So thank you. I will take questions. We got a few minutes. Hey, Tom.
Authorization to continue at the funding levels you have now, but then we just had a big infusion in the state budget. Is there an expectation that the state budget will stay at $4 billion, or is that another headwind we need to talk about?
We're having some of those conversations right now. You've seen the surplus budgets that have been discussed. Even though we are seeing some slowing in revenues at the state level, the forecasted budgets are actually continuing to, those revenues are continuing to outpace the forecasted budgets. So that surplus remains. So we're having those conversations with the governor's office and others right now about trying to continue that investment.
Hi. In that line, and you anticipate that the local road budget that was appearing for the first time here will stay on the new budget?
I would hope so. So the element budget is in statute, right? So it's 10% of the state budget per statute. So you'll see that investment's always there. But I would hope that, you know, as we look at opportunities for additional funding, that thought is there to leverage it for local cities and counties as well, especially when you are able to distribute money at no match requirement. Part of the biggest challenge, and you all know this, when you talk about local governments, it doesn't seem like a lot, but coming up with either a 10% match or a 30% match or what it is can be a challenge and can be their own headwind. But if we can get out this money at no match, just so they can foundationally take care of their projects and their issues, it's only good news, right? And we've set it up in a way that it's relatively seamless to get those dollars out the door. So I would hope that we would continue to see that. I can't hear you. Just talk, yeah. Yeah, I mean, so I'll just, the question, if you couldn't hear it, was around how is equity playing a part in all of these announcements and considerations. Yeah, the BRT inclusion of MARTA expansion through a BRT system up Sierra 400, serving those communities, obviously, and locating those inline stations. On NEVI, so foundationally, within NEVI, we have built into our NEVI planning work and the location of these sites that equity consideration so that we are serving disadvantaged areas with that investment. All right, and we've got a lot of, if you pull out our plan, you can see a lot of discussion around that as to how these are being located and sited to serve those. On the broadband side, it's absolutely foundational to that, right? What we are doing in broadband is first and foremost taking care of our needs from a traffic management and emergency management perspective, but we are enabling the usage through our OMC procurement to allow private folks on there, to allow other governmental entities on there, so that we can tackle things like, or help improve things like telehealth, remote education, which became so critical during the COVID-19 pandemic, and building out last mile broadband networks in unserved and underserved areas. If you look at a map of Georgia where you have unserved or underserved communities from a broadband perspective, the areas are much bigger than you might think. It's a large portion of the state still does not have access to high-speed internet. We believe that our investment as a middle mile on the interstate can get it that much closer to enable last miles to tap into that and make that investment equation a little bit more attractive, right, for these last mile ISPs that are looking to build into communities and see that reach grow, right? So from a broadband perspective, it's foundational to that program. So that's a good question. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate it.